29. From listing appointment to sold, protect the client, protect the transaction, protect your license. A few days after Daniel's post-closing call, Sarah is back in Michael's office. The Reynolds file is sitting on the desk between them again, but this time Michael isn't reviewing a missing document or investigating a specific problem. He closes the file and asks Sarah one final question. If you could go back to the first day you met Mike and Jennifer, what would you do differently? Sarah thinks about it. Remember where this course started. Mike and Jennifer Reynolds were preparing to sell their Arizona home, and Sarah wanted the listing. At that first meeting, it would have been easy for Sarah to focus almost entirely on the exciting parts: the list price, photography, MLS exposure, open houses, offers, and commission. 23 sections later, Sarah understands that listing a home effectively involves much more than putting a property on the market. It begins with the relationship. Who owns the property? Who has authority to sell it? Who is Sarah representing? What does the listing agreement actually say? What are the seller's expectations? What does the brokerage require? Those questions aren't paperwork before the real work begins. They are part of the real work. Then comes the property itself. Sarah learned about the previous roof issue, solar arrangement, HOA, fixtures, improvements, and other information that could affect the transaction. She helped Mike and Jennifer work through the disclosure process instead of treating the SPDS like something to complete as quickly as possible so they could move on to marketing. That's one of the biggest lessons I want you to take from this course. Disclosure is not an event. Disclosure is a process. The seller may disclose information before listing. The agent may learn something during a showing. A monsoon may reveal a new condition during escrow. An inspector may identify something nobody previously understood. A repair contractor may uncover additional information. The transaction keeps moving, and the disclosure analysis may need to move with it. Then Sarah had to price the property. She studied comparable sales, current competition, market conditions, property features, and seller objectives. She provided professional advice without pretending she could guarantee what a buyer would pay or what an appraiser would conclude. That's the difference between professional advice and a promise. A good listing agent can say, based on the information available, here's what the market appears to be telling us. A dangerous listing agent says, I guarantee we'll get $625,000. Then came marketing, photos, MLS information, online advertising, showings, open houses, lockboxes, property access, security, seller preparation. Every marketing decision created another opportunity either to represent the property accurately or to create a future problem. Remember this, marketing doesn't give us permission to improve the facts. If the home has 3 bedrooms, don't magically create a 4th because there's a room with a door. If a feature is leased or financed, don't casually advertise it as owned when that isn't accurate. If you don't know whether something is permitted, don't advertise it as permitted because the seller says everybody in the neighborhood does it. Verify what can reasonably be verified. Disclose what needs to be disclosed. And when you don't know, don't guess. Then David walked into Sarah's open house. Suddenly, agency became more complicated. Sarah already represented the Reynolds, and David asked whether she could represent him too. That moment reminded us that an agent's desire to create a transaction cannot override conflicts, confidentiality, informed consent, brokerage policy, or Arizona's agency requirements. Sometimes the professional answer is not, absolutely, I'll represent everyone. Sometimes it's, before we go any further, we need to talk about representation. Then the offer arrived, $605,000. Mike almost rejected it immediately. Sarah slowed him down. Why? Because price is only one term of an offer. Concessions matter. Financing matters. Earnest money matters. Closing dates matter. Possession matters. Personal property matters. Inspection rights matter. Contingencies matter. Estimated seller proceeds matter. A listing agent's job isn't to look at the first page and announce whether the offer is good or bad. It's to help the seller understand the transaction the seller is actually considering. Then came the counteroffer and competing offer. Sarah learned to communicate accurately, protect confidential information, follow seller instructions, track expiration times, and make sure everyone understood when an agreement had actually been reached. She also learned never to manufacture urgency. If there are 2 offers, there are 2 offers. If there aren't, don't create imaginary buyers because you think it makes you a stronger negotiator. Professional negotiation is still truthful negotiation. Then the inspection arrived. Roof flashing, HVAC, plumbing, electrical concerns, water intrusion. Sarah could have tried to become the expert on every one of those systems. She didn't. She recognized when other professionals were needed. That is not weakness. That is competence. A real estate license doesn't make you a roofer, electrician, structural engineer, attorney, appraiser, lender, title officer, home inspector, tax advisor, or insurance professional. Your job is to understand enough to recognize the issue, protect the transaction, communicate with your client, and bring in appropriate expertise when necessary. Then the appraisal came in low. Again, Sarah didn't panic. She didn't pressure the appraiser. She didn't promise the seller the value would change. She worked through the appropriate process, provided relevant information, and helped the Reynolds evaluate their contractual options. Then everyone approached closing. The repairs had to be completed. The chandelier had to come back. Closing figures needed review. Documents needed signing. The loan needed funding. The deed needed recording. Possession needed to occur according to the agreement. Sarah learned another phrase worth remembering. Almost closed isn't closed. And finally, 6 months later, the transaction came back. David had questions about moisture. That's when Sarah discovered the value of everything she had done before. The texts, the disclosures, the inspection documents, the repair records, the emails, the contract changes, the transaction file. When Michael said, "Show me what happened," Sarah didn't have to reconstruct an entire transaction from memory. The file told the story. Michael looks at Sarah. "So what did you learn?" Sarah smiles. "That getting the listing is the easy part?" Michael laughs. "Sometimes." But Sarah's answer is actually deeper than that. Effective listing agents manage people, property, information, expectations, disclosures, deadlines, negotiations, documentation, and risk. They protect confidential information without using confidentiality as an excuse to conceal something that must be disclosed. They follow lawful client instructions without allowing a client to direct them into unlawful conduct. They advocate for their client without misrepresenting facts to the other side. They market aggressively without advertising inaccurately. They negotiate confidently without manufacturing information. They understand contracts without pretending to be attorneys. They understand property issues without pretending to be inspectors. They understand financing without pretending to be lenders. They understand appraisal issues without trying to control the appraiser. And when something goes wrong, they don't hide it. They communicate, they document, they involve their broker. They solve what can be solved and bring in qualified professionals for what cannot. Michael hands Sarah the Reynolds file. "That's what I want you to remember on your next listing. And that's what I want you to remember when you leave this course. The goal isn't simply to get another listing. It isn't simply to put a sign in the yard. It isn't simply to generate multiple offers. And it isn't simply to collect a commission. The goal is to take a seller from the first listing conversation through a successful Arizona closing, while handling the transaction professionally, accurately, competently, and with the appropriate disclosures along the way. Because the best listing agents aren't just good at selling homes. They're good at protecting people while homes are being sold. If there's one final broker tip you carry with you from listing and selling Arizona homes effectively, make it this. A successful closing is important. A successful closing that was handled correctly is the goal. Thank you for completing listing and selling Arizona homes effectively. 3 hours disclosure continuing education with Dodge School of Real Estate. Online discussion 1. Looking at the entire Reynolds transaction, why is disclosure better understood as an ongoing process rather than a single form completed at the beginning of the listing? Answer. Property information can develop or change throughout a transaction. The seller may discover a condition after completing the initial disclosure. An inspection may reveal additional information. Repairs may uncover another issue, or circumstances may change before closing. An effective listing agent continues evaluating disclosure responsibilities throughout the listing and transaction, rather than assuming that completing one disclosure form permanently ends the issue. 2. What is one of the most important lessons Sarah learned about working with other professionals during the transaction? Answer. Sarah learned that competence includes recognizing the limits of her own expertise. Her role is to identify issues, communicate with her clients, manage the real estate transaction, and involve qualified inspectors, contractors, lenders, appraisers, escrow professionals, title professionals, attorneys, or her designated broker when the issue requires expertise beyond her role. 3. If you had to give a new Arizona listing agent one piece of advice before the agent takes a first listing, what should it be? Answer. Approach the listing as a complete professional responsibility rather than simply a marketing assignment. Establish the representation correctly. Learn the property. Encourage complete and accurate disclosures. Communicate expectations. Document important decisions. Understand the agreements being used. Track deadlines. protect confidential information, involve the broker when necessary, and continue protecting the client's lawful interests through closing and beyond.